Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson, back with my mini-series with my good friend, Dr. Greg Bailey. If you don't know Greg, you should, but you can always look up Juvenescence. It's an incredible longevity company that he's the chairman of. Very prolific investor and founder and all-around businessman. We get to talk about him on a number of our shows, but this episode we get to talk about a different direction. He is somewhat new owner of a SailGP team. If you don't know SailGP, it's like what Formula One cars are, except in the racing world. And I finally got to go to my first one, and it was very exciting. And our guest this week had a big part of why it was so exciting. And I'm going to let Greg do the introductions here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce the driver for the NorthStar Canadian team, Giles Scott. And Giles, how many gold medals have you won?
Two.
What class in the Olympics did you win your 2 gold medals?
In the FIN class, the men's single-handed heavyweight in 2016 and 2020 or 2021 actually.
Got it. And how does one become a double Olympic gold medalist?
The answer to that's probably quite long. But simply, I suppose, bit of hard work, a smidgen of talent maybe, but really that's not. It's kind of, a lot of people say it's really not the key part. Hard work, bit of dedication, being slightly obsessive, slightly weird in certain aspects as well, I think.
So a young male or female sailor is looking to embark upon an ambitious career in sailing.
Yeah.
What recommendations, do you have? Is it by getting the right coach? Is it, obviously geography, having access to the water is huge. What would you say?
Yeah, it's whenever I get asked this question, and I've been asked it by, young kids that are already involved in sailing, and actually even not even sailing in other sports. And the first point to start with, I think, is to enjoy what you're doing, especially when you're that young. Like I look back on how I got into sailing, and really, it wasn't through anything other than enjoyment. I just liked going out there on the water and going sailing. And in fact, when I was a young kid, it took me 2 or 3 years before I even did my first race because I wasn't interested in it. I had to be kind of slightly coerced into it by my parents. So really, I think the key thing initially when you're starting out is to make sure that what you're doing you enjoy, so that the investment in time doesn't become a chore, it becomes a pleasure.
How important is reading the wind? And I know that you sailed in Canada on the Ottawa River, which can't be that windy. And you've also sailed in, the south part of England where it is quite windy. So
yeah,
how much is reading the wind, and how important does that fit into this equation? Then we'll kick it over to you, Jess.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I think it's a big part of sailboat racing as a whole, and that's across a broad spectrum of, if you're sailing around at 3 or 4 knots in a keelboat, or you're flying around in an F50 like we do in SailGP, and being able to look at the water, read the environment, and then I suppose be able to make a educated guess or prediction on what's going to come next is really the key part that makes the decision making process within at least tactical sailboat racing. It kind of that's the big differentiator between good and not so good sailors, I suppose. So yeah, it's a big part of racing.
So sorry, one more. So to be a gold medalist, is it?
Yeah.
You have to be intuitive, that you just intuitively can pick this up. You're taught this, or is it all in the mental toughness that wins you 2 gold medals?
I think the majority of it can be taught and learned. Especially the stuff that we've just touched on in terms of how you read what your eyes are seeing effectively. That can be taught. A lot of the kind of macro skills that are involved in sailing boat, again, can be taught, but there's all, like any sport, there's a finesse element, that the little bit of, I'm not it's not correct to call it magic because it's not magic, but just a little bit of something that you can do slightly differently to somebody else trying to do the same thing is also very important as well. And a lot of that, again, can be learned through repetition and practice, but the rate at which different individuals pick those skills up is where the deviation comes, I think.
Jess, got to beg some questions.
Yeah, I want to talk about this idea of finesse. I'm kind of a nerd for like the literature on mastery science and deliberate practice, and kind of how like the brain myelinates neural connections. When people get really good at things, it grows more myelin around those neural connections. Okay.
Right.
And, like I didn't reach anywhere near your levels, but like in judo, I went to the point where I was like trying out for nationals, right? Which is obviously many steps below winning a gold medal in the Olympics. But there is this aspect of like it's the subtle nuances that made the difference. It's like this pattern recognition thing. Like I was this tall, skinny guy in my weight classes.
Yeah.
And so knowing what they were probably going to do to me and being able to like spot the pattern early enough to counter them before they drop me on my head, like what you're calling finesse, I'm calling nuances. For people who don't know your world, like it was so fun. Greg invited me out to LA when you won the SailGP, and I had no idea that you guys were that close to the shore, that it was going to be like that tense, like that you guys were like so close to smashing boats. And like this is like I'd never thought about sailing at like this kind of excitement at all. I just didn't have a background, and but like talking about nuances. I mean, there was obviously a couple of near collisions, and there was some intensity there in LA. For somebody who just doesn't have a background, somebody who hasn't been listening to these episodes that Greg and I have been doing with Annie and Jerice and stuff.
Yeah.
Can you tell them what a driver is? And then can you
Yes.
give an example of one nuance that like you need years in sailing to get the feel for that nuance?
Yeah. So I suppose first with my role on the boat, as you said, I'm the driver. So I suppose I'm in charge, and I'm just as it says, I'm the driver. Imagine me behind the wheel of a race car. I have the wheel. I don't have pedals. I don't have an accelerator or a brake, but I have a crew that I work with that is effectively my or the engine, or becomes part of the yacht. So as well as deciding on does the boat go left, right, I suppose any key decision point in terms of what the yacht is going to do around the race course effectively comes through me. So it may come from a conversation or a comms loop with a trimmer or a pilot. But I suppose I'm I suppose the river mouth that outputs the decision point. So
You're the final decision, buddy. You're the final decision.
Yeah, for good and for bad sometimes. So yeah, but then down to the like what you were saying about the nuances. You can break down sailing many ways, but there's tactical sailing, which is basically reading tactical and strategic sailing, which is reading the wind, reading the water, reading what your competitors are doing, and then making a decision on where and how you want to sail the boat relative to the wind, water, and what your competitor's up to. That's quite an experience-led skill set, I think. But then there's also this skill set which is more in your own yacht, how you sail it, and being able to get 100% of performance out of the yacht that you're in, along with your crew. And I suppose an example there would be that we sail these boats on a series of knife edges to get 100% performance, much like any race car or a fighter plane. The more inherently unstable the platform is, the higher the potential for good speed. So we are always trying to teeter-totter up to these series of knife edges that get the boat going that a little bit quicker. For me, in my role, it'll be a really precise steering angle, dealing with a side slip of the boat, how Billy the pilot, how high he decides to fly the boat, how much power and roll moment CJ, the wing trimmer, decides to put into the yacht, and then how I amend the steering around that is a, I suppose, a crude example of a bit of finesse.
Well, and for anybody who isn't familiar, like you should hop on YouTube and just Google and watch when NorthStar won the race. But if people aren't familiar with these F-50 boats, they are literally out of the water foiling.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy the 0-60. Like, I don't know. I don't think about something without a motor being able to like round a corner and then all of a sudden be going that fast, that quickly.
They do outperform powerboats. Like the F-50 that we sail on, like we have chase boats that, you know, they've got 400 horsepower on the back of them, and they don't keep up. The yachts are seriously impressive, and the sport of sailing as a whole over the course of the last 10 years has moved on so much. It's fascinating, and as you say, if people aren't sailors, just YouTube it, and you'll be able to get a good look at what it's all about.
Yeah. So my next question is actually for Greg. You know, my favorite thing on this show is that we get to learn from these people who have reached the absolute top of their game. Obviously, winning a SailGP, winning gold medals. Greg, as Giles was talking and thinking about like essentially all these different forms of pattern recognition that have to come together, and then getting a whole team to see what you see and react together. It made me think about business and investing and how you like, you know, you look at Medivation, and you have to find not only like find drugs, find a great development drug CEO, read the markets, get the investors, get the FDA testing. I mean, like there is so many of these things that have to come together in concert. When obviously, you know, Medivation going to 14.3 billion. You know, the next one, Biohaven, selling Nurtec for 11.6 billion. And can you talk about this principle and how it applies in business in your mind, of the nuances and the pattern recognition?
Yeah, I mean, I think Giles explained it very well. You know, there's so much you can learn, and then there's so much that is just experience. You know, I literally just got off the phone with somebody who had one of the top psychedelics in the world, and they had an issue with their hedge fund guy who crushed them, and they never recovered from it. And, you know, and I learned about that at Medivation, so that it wasn't a problem at Biohaven, that the hedge fund guys can have an ulterior motive and can just drive your stock down, even when you've had good results. So there's things you just can't learn without doing, and you would never anticipate. And so Giles, you know, going back to what you just talked about, you know, you can't anticipate. I think it was in Brazil that cut us off. Was it San Francisco or LA? Somebody like literally cut us off. Who was that?
Oh God, it happens so much. I'm not sure of the example that you're thinking of, but yeah,
it was like in the middle of nowhere,
the
and suddenly you had to redirect, and it cost us probably a place or two. But you know, that snap decision, you know, you wouldn't anticipate them doing it because it puts them at peril as well. And you have so much of that in business, and that's where it comes down to, and which is one of the reasons that Phil and I were so excited to bring Giles on as the driver, because he's known in the sailing sector as this calming influence, you know, who doesn't, you know, okay, this bad happened, let's move on. We had a problem with the boat in the first race and the second day. You know, okay, that's fine. Let's move on to the next event. We'll sort it out. Giles, how much is that recovery is important, and how do you think about the other sailors in SailGP? There's specifically, you can sort of talk about the people who are ahead of us in the race. So it's the best sailors in the world, would you say?
Yeah, no, it is absolutely the best sailors in the world. It's kind of all the great and good of, well, I suppose it's people that have rolled out of things like the America's Cup, the Olympics over the last 10 to 15 years, and some current and some past. So it is a hotbed for talent for sure. And just the way that the racing is framed it's, as we've touched on, it's high octane, it's quick paced, it's really geared towards being broadcast friendly and non-sailor friendly as well. And as a purist sailor, at times that can be a little bit frustrating, but the product that's been produced is incredible. And I suppose coming back to your first point in terms of the recovery, it is so critical to get right and to be level-headed, or attempt to be level-headed. And something that I certainly have to think about pretty hard and work on a lot is how is what I'm doing affecting my crew? How is my mood affecting the crew? Something goes wrong, I get frustrated. If I suddenly snap at some input from a crew member that might be very, very valid, but I'm in a foul mood, so I have a little bit of a bark back, and this just sets this spiral. And it's something that I work with. I work very hard with Joe to kind of stay on top of, because it's always this. You're always trying to manage your level of adrenaline, how you're responding to situations, and most importantly, how you're communicating with your crew, because you see it all the time that teams just unravel, and they have one they have one small mistake that then spirals into race losses. And some sailors handle it better than others and manage it better. But yeah, as we said, it's the best in the world trying to do it.
I think that's consistent. To go back to you, Jess, in business, you need that leader at Medivation or Biohaven or XYZ corporation in fintech, who's that steadying hand, who knows how to play his team, to use his team. Who do you like and who do you don't like as far as drivers in SailGP? Who are the issues? Who are the people that respect, dislike, whatever?
I'd say, I have respect, I think, for everybody. I'd like to think that I'm certainly, I like to see the good in people, even if they come with some bad. Competitively, when we beat the likes of the Australians, the British,
Slingsby,
the Kiwis, yeah. So Tom Slingsby, Dylan Fletcher, Pete Burling and his crew, the Kiwi, the Spanish are another top team. It's really the people that I want to beat most are the people that are consistently at the top of the pack, basically.
And do you have any issues with any of them?
No, of course, like all humans, there's you get on with people better than others, but I have no problem with anyone. It's a really small world. It really is. It's sailing's, like, certainly at the high performing end, it's a very small world, and there's a pretty select group of individuals that are capable of sailing these boats, and then the circuit in itself becomes effectively it's a traveling circus, really. And we fight tooth and nail on the water. We want to bang each other up, and we want to win, as much as anyone does. But there's quite a nice camaraderie, generally speaking, off the water. There's no real hatreds. I certainly don't have any hatreds within the class.
There's no one who cuts you off and you despise. What about what happened at America's Cup? And that's relevant to how you think about Ryan, who's the driver for the Great Britain team, and Sir Ben, who's the owner of the Great Britain team. And both of them were colleagues on the Great Britain America's Cup team, which you were part of. And there was a transition there. How did that go down?
Yeah, so I suppose it's the America's Cup last year, and for me personally, it was a challenge. It was a challenge. I was one of three helmsmen. The America's Cup is owned. The team is owned and run by Ben Ainsley. He's the most successful British Olympian of all time. Great, amazing sailor, for those that don't know. But yeah, I was one of three sailors alongside him and Dylan Fletcher. As we got close to racing in the competition, Ben decided that he wanted to sail with Dylan, so I became the bridesmaid, effectively in that driver relationship, which clearly, professionally speaking, was one of the more challenging things I've certainly had to go through and manage from from quite a few levels, because I held a role of leadership within that team as a head of the sailing team. So to suddenly be quite firmly demoted off the boat and and effectively sidelined. There was a few tricky things that I had to navigate there, but like, I think all these things are sent to challenge you, and I certainly learned a lot from it, and gained quite a lot of motivation out of the back of it as well, which hopefully will prove useful.
So that's got to be sweet. If you win a race and or you beat Dylan in Great Britain because Sir Ben owns it, and that's just a human emotion. What did you learn from the challenge? Then over to you, Jess. What did you learn from the chat? You said you learned from that challenge. What did you learn, Giles?
What did I learn? I think the biggest thing I learned was that I'm under pretty challenging situations. I'm still capable of being a pretty solid team player. That's I suppose the biggest thing that I thought I would be capable of, but I had it fully. I had that skill set fully flexed. I'm quite proud of the way I held my head through it, and I didn't, there's no toys going out of any prams. I mucked in, I helped, I did my bit. It was what it was,
you guys would have won
There's plenty of chat over a few more, over a beer or two, that I'm sure we can go into more detail, but it's history.
Yes.
I want to talk about this concept of keeping your head, leading the team.
Yeah.
I mean, the emotions of the leader have such a follow-on effect, are so contagious across teams, right? And yet, ambitious people who are trying to do big things, are often folks who have high emotion and can run a little hot or things like this, right? When you think about your own emotional regulation, and specifically with your communication, as potentially really tough things are happening right now, or mistakes are made, or like you have that knee-jerk reaction of how you feel, and then you have that space where it's like, but can I rein this in to make the right choice for the team, for the organization, instead of what I think I should do versus what I feel like doing. When you think about increasing your ratio of doing what you really deep down think you should do instead of what you feel like doing, what are things that help you with that? Or who do you look up to? Or any hints for the rest of us who are trying to domesticate our own emotions and control our emotions instead of how our emotions control us?
This topic is so on point for me, because I've literally been with Joe Glanfield, our coach, last week, discussing this exact topic. Because it was one of the areas that I felt that I really I had to work on at the back of our last event in San Francisco. And I think for me personally, if I look back to my Olympic days, when I was sailing on my own, it was just me in a boat. Having to manage my emotions was less important, actually, because even though I was wound up, adrenaline was pumping, furious at something or another, I don't quite know what, I was still capable of making the right decision under that stress. But then you then put that response into a team environment, it breaks down and doesn't work. Because if I get wound up, it's not just me that I'm affecting, it's everyone else, and we're an engine as a unit, and I'm suddenly ripping out cogs because I'm breaking their ability down to work. So I think for me, how I try to look at it is that if I begin to feel those emotions bubble, or my blood begin to boil, is kind of how I describe it. I need to have a response of, well, what's the most important decision now? So it's an immediate ability to park what's happened, and then curb the frustration by immediately bringing it back to what's best now. And that should trigger me back into the next most important decision.
And do you have anything to help you remember to ask yourself that question? Or is it like you have a hero you're trying to be more like? Is there a book you read? Is there something you say before a race? Like, how does someone listening create that habit within themselves?
I think, like most things, it's repetition. But also just having just knowing that it's there is, I think, a massive step in itself. Just being aware that that is a possible response that has a negative implication. Like the last thing I want, even when my blood's boiling, is for things to get worse. But with retrospect and analysis and review, I've been able to break it down with a bit of support and look at it and go, yeah, well, that didn't help, did it? You made one mistake and you compounded it by letting things escalate. And I think if you have the ability to just recognize that it's an issue, but I think more often than not, that's enough to trigger you into the, okay, well, what's the next best thing to do?
Yeah. Greg, another question for you. This amplifying effect, I feel like there's also misses that I've made on the upside of not celebrating the wins with the team. Like, obviously you guys at Juvenescence had your big announcement there with the Middle East investors, M42. And I saw, your CEO, Richard Marshall, talk about it. I saw, I saw what you put out there. I saw what Jim Allen had out there. And all three of you were bringing the team, like whatever your posts were, whatever it was, like you were celebrating the team, you were bringing the team into it. It wasn't Richard's win. You know what I mean? And like, I saw that you guys set an example for kind of like seizing the opportunity of amplification on the other side of having that be everybody's win instead of Richard's win or your win as the chairman or Jim as, co-founder. Any thoughts about that side?
Yeah, again, I think Giles articulated it very, very well. I don't care how good Giles is. If Billy, CJ, Annie, Cooper, Tim, Tom, Therese, they're not on their game, he ain't winning. So I always remember O.J. Simpson, who's obviously an athlete who's created a lot of various emotions. But, one of the first things he did when he went to the Buffalo team was he bought all of the linemen a Rolex watch. He was very aware that his career was in their hands. So I think what Giles is talking about is key. And having that ability to moderate. So first you have to know it's an issue, which I think Giles has acknowledged. Then you have to have a reason to change, and he has one because you want to win. And then you have to know how to change, which is what he's been working with the coach, Joe Glanfield, on. How do I, because all of our emotions are immediate to react. And, and you get angry and it makes the matter generally worse, not better. And so can you have something hit you, take a step back and not immediately react, which I think, Giles, is what you're talking about, or reprocess the information. And you've got to realize that, you're reacting to something and that person may have had a bad day, and so it's nothing personal to you. It's just their own indication. So, the key teams are the only way you're going to be successful in life, other than if you're this lone sailor in a fin boat, at the Olympics, and it's you. And even then, you're probably, a lot came from your coach and your family being supportive. How do you prepare for a race, Giles, mentally? Like it's the day before, the night before. When is it that you start to mentally prep?
It's before that. It's before I get on the flight. I think before I get on the flight, I'll do a lot of video analysis of the venue that we're going to. I'll refresh on various playbooks, how we sail, review notes from debriefs, and then more into getting actually ready on the day. I've got a few, I suppose, a few oddities. Like when I was Olympic sailing, when I was 13 years old, I tied a rope bracelet onto my wrist, and I was at one of my first races, and I tied it there. I went home, went to school. I was like, I wonder if I can leave that bit of rope on there for a week. And then I left it there for a week. I was like, maybe I can leave it on for another week. And time kept rolling on, and it became this lucky charm. And it was on my wrist until I think I would turn 29 years old. Like, wow. till after I'd won in Rio, I had the same bit of rope on my wrist from when I was like 13. And it just became this lucky charm. And there's lots of weird things I do. Like, I don't know, I'll never flush the toilet without the lid down, and kind of ritual stuff that gets that just kind of gets my mind thinking about the right side of things, and also some visualization as well. I find that really useful in the high paced F50 racing, especially because it's so fast paced. And what we were discussing earlier about being able to reset, it's not being able to reset yourself over the course of 5 minutes. You've got to be able to reset within half a second, because the next decision is only 2 seconds away. So everything that we do in an F50 is actually quite simple, but being able to do it under pressure and under the time constraint we have to do it is where it's really, really hard.
Jess, a little quick question for you then. You judo, you talked about how far you progressed with that. I know you progressed very far with snowboarding. What were your weird idiosyncrasies to prepare? Or did you have any rituals?
With judo, before the fight, I would stop looking at my opponent, and kind of like slapping, just like arms and legs, and like stimulate the nerves, but just very, very deep breaths, like kind of a little bit of oxygen loading. But also, like, I use that time to clear my mind, and kind of like, that Japanese saying mushin, kind of like the Zen, like no mind kind of thing, of like just kind of like embracing at this point, conscious thought will get in the way of pattern recognition and instinct. Snowboarding, same thing. Like when I'm going to drop the biggest cliff I've ever done, or I'm trying to do a backflip with a spin, and there's some jeopardy, right? Like that one's very simple. It's just a ritual, but I just say I just say 3, 2, 1, go. And it's like this conscious, like I'm thinking about it, I'm analyzing, I'm visualizing all these things. I'm strapped in, I'm at the top. It's like really steep because you get enough speed to do these things, right? And then it's just like, again, this clearing of the mind and going, I need to stop thinking and trust the previous repetitions. So I can be like truly alive to the situation instead of bothered by what I'm thinking and then get interrupted by, a little bit of a hot edge or something like that. So trying to get like 100% present our mind.
Giles, you calm or nervous before a race starts?
I think nerves play their part, but I think I go quiet, and I suppose that could be seen as being calm, but it's not that my mind is calm necessarily. My mind's racing away, but I think I would be seen to be placid and calm externally.
And at the starting gate, when you're lining the boats up, because the key to SailGP Formula One of sailing, because they're hurtling around, as Jess has said, is lining yourself up for the start.
Yeah.
Would you say you're more nervous or calm as you're coming into the start, into the starting box to get your position to try and position to win the race off the start?
By that time there's no nerves. The nervous like feelings for me are night before, morning on the shore, and then as soon as I get onto the boat, there's a switch, and it's almost a bit of relief. It's like, oh, okay, it's a bit of a thank God the prep work's done. Let's just go and do it now. And then once you're into like proper racing scenarios, like you're talking about with the starting, it's so process orientated, and there's a plan. We've discussed it. We have a series of moves that we're gonna try and pull off. We might not be able to, given the situation or position that we're in, but we're just going to do whatever we can, the best we can with the position that we're given, basically. And so that all those kind of nervy type feelings, they completely disappear for me.
Jess, where does that lead you?
Well, I want to talk about this. I know we've been talking about it already, but so I'd never been to a race. I barely watched it on YouTube when Greg invited me out to LA.
Yeah.
And like, I think it was like the second race, you went from like 3rd to like 11th. And I mean, in the VIP booth, like you could just feel
Thanks,
the emotions
buddy.
just go like, oh, right. And I was just like, oh, geez,
Yeah.
And I think one of my favorite sayings of all time is from your fellow countryman there in Britain, Mr. Churchill, who said that he thought so much of success has to do with going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Okay. And like, I mean, I can't imagine what the feelings on the boat were, because the feelings of all of us in the booth, like, we're just like, oh,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And then you go from 11th to second place in, I don't know, 7 seconds or something. You pass the whole field, and like, you're in contention. Anyways, it was like thrilling as a spectator. But again, I want to talk about this same thing of like the mental health space of we have just dropped to almost the entire back of the pack.
Yeah.
And like, kind of what you said about like just any practical things you have to say about being like, that happened, what now? Any advice for the rest of us when we come up against a concern?
What you're talking about seeing there in LA, where we were in 11th. So we obviously made, I can't remember exactly what the error was, but we made a huge error that put us there. We're out the back. But then, and of course, through that period, we're all quite wound up, I'd imagine. And it's a good example. It's a good example of what can happen if you do the next move correctly. Now, the conditions that you were watching the sailing in there was really, really light. So the speed differences between the boats are massive. So when you go into a race venue like LA in those sorts of conditions, every boat will have the expectation that the possibility of them getting it wrong and at some point in the regatta finding themselves at the back of the pack is quite likely. And the game is about how do you get from the back to where you think you belong at the front, right? Where that changed a little bit as the conditions change, and then the better boats are able to be more consistent. So there's an element of it's kind of part and package of being able to ride the roller coaster that is SailGP racing in that kind of condition. But it still comes with all those human emotions that we've been talking about, the ability to respond to the bad that you've just been going through and make that correct next step. And what we were talking about earlier is exactly what we're trying to do in those situations.
Yeah. Greg, what does that make you think?
I remember that moment. I literally thought the boat was broken, because we'd gone from 3rd to 11th like that. And you're like, oh my gosh, this can't be happening. This is Dubai all over again. Where the rope came off the pulley, right? On Sunday.
Yeah. It was. And there's a whole ream of reasons why you end up in those sorts of positions. But the nature of the racing is so up and down, and even the top teams, like the team that wins, whatever team's going to win this season. I mean, I hope it's us. I really hope it's us, obviously. But whoever it is going to have hard races where they finish last. They're going to have events where they're towards the bottom of the pack. And really, it's this game of being able to be one step ahead on consistency than the next best boat by the time you get to the end of the season. Now, exactly what that average is going to look like statistically, we don't really know. But for instance, last season, if you'd have finished, I think it was 4.6, that would have been enough to get you into the top 3 final for the season win. So you could have done 8 races, not even made the top 3, and then still been in the top 3 for a shot at the overall title for the season. So this game of consistency is really, really key. And along the way, you got to ride the roller coaster. Like, we've done amazing over the last few events, and long may that continue. But we've got to be ready to dig ourselves out of a dip if it comes our way. But we'll do whatever we can to not let that happen.
It's one of the things, Jess, I love about this event. I mean, you as you said, just came to the LA event, but 5 races, no teams won twice. This is completely different from Formula One. The top guy is going to finish last, in one of the races. It's just extraordinary. So it comes down to this consistency and and the Canadian team, NorthStar, is blessed for having Giles because of, his second, first, second, competing against teams that sailed together all year long, at the America's Cup. And Giles just sailed with the team for the first time because happily he also spent a lot of time in Canada, so he's got a Canadian passport. So we get lucky with that. So had you sailed in the finals of the America's Cup instead of Dylan and Sir Ben, what would the outcome be?
I guess we'll never know, and you won't, and it's not
Very
and
diplomatic.
I'm certainly not saying that with any undercurrent that I think I could have done better. Look, it's a decision was made, and it just became history. And yeah, for me personally, it was crushing and whatnot. But look, I mean, I think the most important thing is it didn't dent how I viewed myself or how I see my own ability. It was just a decision that was made, and that was it. And yeah, you never know. I certainly would have been capable of getting the boat around the course, but how well, I don't know. You just never know. It's not the first time I've had a situation like that evolve. And funnily enough, it was involving Ben for the selection for the 2012 Olympics in London. And one boat gets to go to represent the Finn class per nation. And we had a trials process that was quite closely fought. He was number one in the world, and I was number two in the world. And we were both out there, and number one and two, but only number one got to go to the Olympics. I had to sit it out and watch and wait for 2016, and I learned a lot of lessons through that as well. And really, it's like everyone gets bogged down with how did it feel, what was it like throughout the process. And yeah, it was challenging and it was difficult, but I got through it. But it's history, it's done. It's really what's important is how you respond to it and get better and take a step forward.
Should he legitimately, did he beat you out for that position 2012, or because he was Sir Ben and legend?
No, he was Sir Ben, but no, it was legit. There was a process, and he won every single event in the trials process, and they were international events, and I finished second at them. So it was all fair and square. There's no controversy there at all. It was absolutely fair and square.
Got it. No, thank you for sharing, and sorry about the controversial question at the end. It's always interesting because you have a different style from Dylan. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
How would you compare the two? And then Jess can bring us home with the last question.
It's a good question. I'm not how my style compares to Dylan. I mean, Dylan's an incredibly talented sailor, but he is different. He's very technically minded. He's maybe a bit more seat of the pants when it comes to racing decisions, maybe. Yeah, I'm not too sure, but for sure, like you can see it when personality wise, we're different, and we get on really well off the water as well. Like that was another thing that throughout that whole America's Cup process, I was actually quite proud and pleased, was that my relationship with Dylan and with Ben was still absolutely fine. We worked together as a unit on all the pre-start stuff, and it was there was very little drama that would be to hide. There really wasn't much to it.
Huge compliment to you, Jess.
Well, I mean, this has been super fun for me. I think my biggest takeaways for today are repetitions and pushing yourselves on emotional regulation, and especially in our communications to our teams, and being honest, like being aware and being honest about, hey, we're all going to end up at the back of the pack. We're all going to have a mistake. That can't destroy us. We need to have that be part of the game in business as well. And then I really loved your this idea of the compound interest of consistency instead of the one great thing or something. And those things really spoke to me today. So thanks for making time for this. And good luck on the next race.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
And Greg, always great to have you.
Second or first next race?
Second or first?
In New York.
I love it. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Bye now.
Thanks, Giles.